I never told anyone the full story. Not my mother, not my therapist, not even Paul. And he was there. But tonight, 2 years later, I'm sitting in a coffee shop in downtown Boston with my back to the wall and a clear view of both exits. And I think it's time. Maybe writing it down will make it less real. Or maybe I just need someone else to know. Looking back, I should have known the moment we signed the papers. The house was a steal, 3 bedrooms, original hardwood floors, wraparound porch, 7 acres of Adirondack forest, all for $140,000. The real estate agent, a nervous woman named Cheryl with overplucked eyebrows, kept saying things like handyman special and price to sell. Paul and I were too high on the fantasy to listen. 2 years of pandemic lockdown in a Brooklyn 1-bedroom had broken something in both of us. We wanted silence. We wanted trees. We wanted to wake up and see nothing but fog rolling through bare November branches. We got exactly what we wanted. The first week was everything. I'd set up my laptop at the kitchen table, a beautiful oak thing the previous owners had left behind, and work on branding packages for tech startups while Paul took calls from his standing desk in what we called the library, but was really just a spare room with one sagging bookshelf. At night, we'd build a fire in the stone fireplace, drink cheap red wine from enamel camping mugs, and congratulate ourselves on escaping the rat race. "Can you believe this is our life now?" Paul said on night 4, stretching his legs toward the flames. I smiled and leaned into him. "Best decision we ever made." The house had quirks, sure. The floorboards on the back porch groaned like someone was walking across them even when no one was. The cellar door in the kitchen, a heavy oak thing set into the floor with a brass ring pull, stayed locked with a rusty padlock that looked like it had been there since the Eisenhower administration. Paul had jiggled it on our walkthrough. "We'll get a bolt cutter," he'd said. "Probably just old junk down there." We never did. The first thing I noticed was the food. I'm a creature of habit. Every Sunday I inventory the pantry, make a list, drive into Lake Placid for supplies. On our second Sunday, I opened the cupboard where I kept the canned goods, and something felt off. It took me a second to register. 3 cans of Campbell's chunky soup were missing. I'd bought 6. Now there were 3. "Hey, did you eat the soup?" I called to Paul, who was on the couch scrolling through his phone. "What soup?" "The chunky soup, the beef and barley." "Nah, not really a soup guy in November. Too warm for soup." It was 42 degrees outside and raining sideways. But Paul's eating habits had always been mysterious to me, so I shrugged and added soup to the list. The next week, 2 cans of Spam vanished. Then a jar of peanut butter, the whole thing, gone. The weird part wasn't just that it was missing, it was that the empty jars and cans never appeared in the recycling. I'd find the recycling bin exactly as I'd left it, but the food was just gone. "You think we have mice?" I asked Paul one evening as I was making pasta. He didn't look up from his laptop. "In November? They're probably all frozen solid. Besides, mice don't eat whole jars of Jif. Raccoons, maybe. Those little bastards can get into anything." "Raccoons don't unscrew lids." That got his attention. He looked at me over his screen. "What do you mean?" "I mean the peanut butter jar was sealed, the lid was on tight, and now the whole jar is missing. Jar, lid, everything." He thought about it for a second, then shrugged, a gesture I was starting to hate. "Maybe you threw it out and forgot. You've been stressed with the Henderson account." I wanted to argue, but what was I going to say? That I suspected a ghost was stealing our groceries? So I let it go. That was my first mistake. The sounds started on a Tuesday night, or maybe Wednesday. The days had started to blur together in the way they do when you work from home and the sun sets at 4:45. I woke up around 3:15 a.m. I know because I checked my phone, squinting at the too bright screen. Something had pulled me out of sleep, but I couldn't identify what. Paul was breathing deeply beside me, one arm thrown over his face. The house was silent, except for the usual creaks and groans of old wood adjusting to the cold. Then I heard it, a soft scraping sound coming from below, not from outside, from under the floorboards, under the kitchen specifically, which was directly beneath our bedroom. Scrape, pause, scrape, scrape, pause. My body went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the November temperature. I lay perfectly still, straining to hear, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. The sound stopped. I waited. 1 minute, 2, 5, nothing. Eventually, I convinced myself it was a branch rubbing against the foundation, or a raccoon. Definitely a raccoon. Paul had said there were raccoons. I pulled the comforter up to my chin and eventually fell back into a thin, uneasy sleep. The next morning, I went down to the kitchen and stood over the cellar door for a long time. The padlock was still there, still rusty, still locked. I put my ear against the wood. Silence. That afternoon, while Paul was on a conference call, I did something that still makes my skin crawl to think about. I took a can of beef stew, the Dinty Moore kind with the pull-tab lid, and placed it on the floor of the pantry, right in the corner. Visible. Obvious. Then I closed the pantry door and went back to work. The next morning, the can was gone. Not moved, not opened and left empty. Gone. Vanished from a closed pantry in a locked house in the middle of 7 acres of frozen forest. I stood in the pantry doorway, staring at the empty corner, and felt the first real wave of fear wash over me. My hands were shaking, my mouth went dry. I backed out of the pantry slowly, like something might jump out at me, and went to find Paul. He was in the library, headphones on, laughing at something on his screen. I stood in the doorway until he noticed me. "Hey, you okay? You look pale." "The cellar," I said. My voice sounded strange, even to me. "We need to open the cellar." "What? Why?" I told him. "Everything. The missing food, the sounds at 3:15 a.m., the can of beef stew." His expression shifted from amused concern to something more serious, but I could see the skepticism still there, the part of him that wanted to find a logical explanation. "Okay," he said slowly. "Okay. Let's check it out." We didn't have a bolt cutter, so Paul grabbed a hammer from the toolbox and went to work on the padlock. It took 3 solid hits before the rusty metal snapped. The sound echoed through the quiet house like a gunshot. He pulled the ring and the heavy door swung upward with a groan that seemed to come from the house itself. A wave of cold, damp air rushed out, carrying with it a smell that made my stomach clench. Earth, mildew, and something else, something organic and human. Body odor, unwashed skin and old sweat. Paul clicked on his phone flashlight and pointed it down into the darkness. A rough wooden ladder descended about 6 feet to a dirt floor. The beam of light swept across packed earth, old cobwebs, a few dusty mason jars from decades past, and footprints, bare footprints in the dirt, human footprints, leading from the base of the ladder into the shadows beyond the light's reach. "Oh God," I whispered. "Oh God, Paul." He didn't say anything, just stared down at those footprints with his mouth slightly open. Then he lowered the door back into place and sat down heavily on the kitchen floor. "We're calling the police," he said. I was already dialing. The dispatcher said they'd send someone out within the hour. "It was a slow day in Lake Placid," she said. "Not much happens up here in November." I almost laughed. We waited on the porch, even though it was freezing. Neither of us could stand to be inside that house. The rain had turned to sleet, tiny pellets of ice stinging our faces. I gripped Paul's arm and stared at the front door like I expected it to burst open. The cruiser pulled up at 4:52 p.m. 2 officers, a middle-aged guy named Kowalski and a younger woman named Vasquez. Kowalski had the weary look of someone who'd spent 20 years responding to noise complaints and lost hikers. Vasquez seemed sharper, more alert, her eyes scanning the property as she walked up. "Ma'am said there's someone in the cellar?" Kowalski asked, shining his flashlight at the house, even though it wasn't dark yet. "My wife heard sounds," Paul said. "And food's been going missing. We found footprints down there." Kowalski and Vasquez exchanged a look, not dismissive exactly, but cautious, like they'd heard a lot of strange things in these woods and learned not to jump to conclusions. "Let's take a look," Vasquez said. We led them inside. The kitchen felt different now, charged with something electric and dangerous. Kowalski pulled open the cellar door and shone a much brighter flashlight into the darkness. Vasquez unholstered her weapon but kept it pointed at the ground. "Police," Kowalski called down. "Anyone down there, come out slowly with your hands visible." Nothing. "I'm going down," Vasquez said. She descended the ladder with practiced ease, her boots making soft thuds on the dirt floor. Kowalski covered her from above, his own hand resting on his weapon. "Anything?" he called. Silence. Then Vasquez's voice, strange and tight. "Kowalski, you need to see this." "What is it?" "Just come down. Bring the homeowners." Paul went first. I followed, my legs shaking so badly I could barely manage the ladder. The smell hit me again, stronger down here, more concentrated, earth and sweat and something sour like old milk. Vasquez was standing at the far end of the cellar, her flashlight beam fixed on a dark corner I hadn't been able to see from above. Kowalski joined her, then Paul, then me. The corner was furnished. That's the only word for it. A nest of old blankets, some of which I recognized. They'd been in a trunk in the spare bedroom, blankets we'd thought the previous owners had left behind. Dozens of empty cans, meticulously stacked in neat pyramids, beans, soup, Spam, vegetables. The beef stew can I'd left in the pantry 2 days ago, empty and clean, added to the collection, a plastic jug of water, a small pile of paperback books, their covers worn to illegibility, a candle stub, a manual can opener, and a hole in the ceiling of the cellar, a gap between the floorboards of the pantry above, just large enough for a thin arm to reach through. "Oh my God," Paul breathed. "Oh my God, he's been reaching up. He's been reaching up into our kitchen." Something moved in the deepest shadow, beyond the reach of the flashlights. All four of us froze. "Come out," Vasquez said. Her voice was steady, but I could see her knuckles white on her weapon. "Slowly, hands where I can see them." The shadow shifted, and a man emerged. He was thin, horrifyingly thin, the kind of thin you see in photographs of prisoners of war. His hair was long and matted, his beard a tangled mass that reached his chest. He wore what had once been a flannel shirt and jeans, both now so caked with dirt and grime they looked like they'd grown from the earth itself. His feet were bare, the soles cracked and blackened. His fingernails were long and ragged, packed with dirt. But it was his eyes that stopped my heart. They were calm, clear, almost gentle. He looked at us like we were the intruders. "Sir," Kowalski said, his voice carefully controlled, "you need to come with us." The man smiled. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen, not because it was cruel or threatening, but because it was warm, like he was genuinely happy to see us. "I was just looking after the house," he said. His voice was rusty from disuse, barely above a whisper. Someone had to. I grabbed Paul's arm and squeezed so hard I left bruises. I found out later. "Who are you?" Vasquez demanded. "What's your name?" The man tilted his head, still smiling. "Edgar Morrison. I own this house." Kowalski's face went pale. I saw it happen, the blood literally draining from his cheeks. He knew that name. He'd heard that name before. "Edgar Morrison," he repeated slowly. "The previous owner. You died 3 years ago. Your family held a funeral. There was a death certificate." Edgar's smile didn't waver. "I didn't die. I just went downstairs. The new people who bought the place, the ones before these folks, they never came up here much. Weekend place, easy to avoid. But I had to be careful, had to be quiet, had to make sure the house was okay." "You've been living down here," Vasquez said. It wasn't a question. "For 3 years. 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days? 18? I lose track in November. The days all look the same. He said it so calmly, like he was telling us about a hobby, woodworking maybe, or stamp collecting. The food, I heard myself say. My voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. You've been taking our food. His eyes shifted to me, and something in his expression changed, softened. I tried to be careful. I didn't want to scare you. You seemed nice, happier than the last ones. I heard you laughing sometimes through the floor. It was nice. It reminded me of before. I thought of all the nights Paul and I had sat at the kitchen table, talking and laughing and living our lives, all those moments, and he'd been right beneath us, listening, watching through the gap in the floorboards. My legs gave out. Paul caught me before I hit the dirt. Vasquez moved forward with handcuffs. Edgar didn't resist. He just held out his wrists, still smiling that gentle, horrible smile. "You'll take care of the house, won't you?" he asked as she clicked the cuffs into place. "It's a good house. It needs someone to look after it." We didn't answer. We couldn't. They led him up the ladder and out into the cold November night. An ambulance came, then another cruiser, then someone from the county. Paul and I sat on the porch steps, wrapped in the same blanket, watching the lights flash against the bare trees. Neither of us spoke. We stayed in a motel in Lake Placid that night. The next morning, Paul called a real estate agent and put the house on the market. We sold it for a loss, $15,000, gone. I didn't care. We moved back to the city, Boston this time, not Brooklyn. 12th floor, concrete and steel, no dirt, no crawl spaces, no gaps in the floorboards. I sleep with the lights on now. I check the locks 3 times before bed. I can't go into basements. I can't open a can of soup without my hands starting to shake. Paul broke his wrist 3 months after it happened. Slipped on an icy sidewalk, nothing dramatic. But sometimes I wonder if it was something else, if something followed us, if something wanted to make sure we remembered. Here's what I still don't understand. The police searched that cellar top to bottom. They found the nest, the cans, the books. They found the gap in the floorboards, exactly wide enough for a thin arm. They found everything, but they never found how he got in and out. The cellar had no exterior door, no windows, no access to the outside except through the kitchen floor, a door that was padlocked from above, with a lock so rusted it took 3 hammer blows to break. The police asked Edgar how he'd managed it, how he'd survived 3 years without ever being detected by 2 different sets of owners, how he'd gotten food and water without ever leaving a trace outside the cellar. He just smiled that gentle smile and said nothing. I looked up Edgar Morrison a few weeks later, found his obituary from 3 years ago, survived by a wife, 2 daughters, and a golden retriever named Scout. Cause of death, suicide. They found his truck by the Saranac River, never found the body. The funeral had a closed casket. His wife, widow I guess, still lives in the area. I thought about calling her, thought about telling her that her husband was alive, that he'd been living in the crawl space of their old house, that he was in a state facility now, getting evaluated by psychiatrists who couldn't figure out how to categorize him. But what would I say? Your dead husband isn't dead. He's just been living in the dark for 3 years, eating canned soup and listening to strangers live in his house. I didn't call. Last week I found a smudge on the inside of our kitchen cabinet, a small dirty mark like someone had pressed their thumb against the white paint. I stared at it for a long time. I don't remember touching that cabinet with dirty hands. Paul said it was probably from the move, something we just never noticed. I cleaned it off with a Clorox wipe and threw the wipe in the trash. Then I took the trash out to the chute. Then I locked the door and checked it 3 times. I still don't know what I believe. But sometimes, late at night, when the building settles and the pipes creak, I hold my breath and listen. And I swear, I can hear something, faint, distant, coming from somewhere below, a soft scraping sound like someone trying to get in. I've never told anyone the full story. Not my therapist, not the police, not even Jenna, and she's known me since 6th grade. But it's been 3 years now, and I still can't look at my own reflection without my hands shaking. So here it is, all of it. This happened in November, 2 days before Thanksgiving. I was trying to get from Salem to Eugene because my Greyhound had blown a transmission somewhere outside Woodburn, and I'd already missed 2 shifts at the coffee shop. Stupid, I know. Hitchhiking. My mom would have killed me if she'd known. But I'd done it before, and honestly, I figured I was pretty good at reading people. Photographer's intuition, right? You spend enough time looking at faces through a viewfinder, you think you can spot the bad ones. It was around 8:30 p.m. when I started walking west on OR 22, thumb out, rain soaking through my Patagonia jacket, the kind of Oregon drizzle that doesn't look like much but gets into your bones after 20 minutes. Temperature was maybe 40 degrees. My phone had been dead for an hour, 0 bars anyway. This stretch of highway cuts through Santiam State Forest, and Verizon might as well not exist out there. I remember thinking the fog was beautiful in a creepy way, how it pooled in the dips of the road and wrapped around the Douglas firs like white gauze. I even took a mental photo. That's what I do. Frame the shot, even when I don't have my Canon. Maybe 10 cars passed in the first hour. None slowed down. Then the white van appeared. It was a Ford Econoline, probably early 2000s, with a dent in the rear bumper and Oregon plates. The kind of van that could belong to a contractor, a delivery driver, or someone you really don't want to get into a van with. But I was cold, my fingers were numb, and when the window rolled down and the driver leaned over with this tired, harmless-looking smile, my gut didn't scream anything. That's the thing that still messes with me. My gut said nothing. "You headed toward Eugene?" he asked. His voice was calm, soft even, like a librarian or something. "Yeah." "You going that far?" "All the way to Florence. Hop in." I hesitated for maybe 3 seconds. His cab was clean. He had a St. Christopher medal hanging from the rear view, coffee cup in the holder, one of those pine tree air fresheners dangling. His name was Dave, he told me. Drove a delivery route twice a week. Pharmaceuticals, he said. The cooler in the back was for temperature-sensitive stuff. Made sense. I got in. The first thing I noticed, maybe 5 minutes down the road, was the mirrors. All of them, side mirrors, rear view, even the little convex blind spot mirror, were covered. Newspaper. Yellowed, old newspaper, like something from a garage sale, taped over the glass with silver duct tape. Every single one, except for a small round mirror, maybe 4 inches across, mounted on the dash and angled toward the back of the van. "Why are all your mirrors taped up?" I asked, trying to sound casual. My hands were warming up against the heater vent, and I was mostly just curious. People are weird about their cars. Dave didn't look at me. His eyes stayed on the road. "Glare gives me migraines," he said, "especially at night. The one on the dash is so I can see if the cargo shifts. Had a box fall once, nearly caused an accident." It made sense, kind of. Looking back now, God, I should have asked more questions. I should have noticed how his fingers tightened on the steering wheel when I mentioned the mirrors. I should have noticed the smell, not the pine air freshener. Underneath it, something sharp and chemical, like bleach or ammonia. But I was tired, and he seemed nice enough, and the heater was finally thawing my feet. We made small talk for a while. He asked what I did. I told him about the coffee shop, about my photography, about my friend Jenna's place in Eugene where I was crashing for the holiday. He nodded along, asked normal questions. "Do you shoot digital or film? What's your favorite coffee drink?" Normal. Completely normal. Except now, when I replay it in my head, I realize he never volunteered anything about himself, not a single personal detail. I did all the talking. About 20 minutes in, we hit a rougher patch of road, and something shifted in the back. Not a box. It was too soft. A kind of shuffling thud, followed by a sound I couldn't place at first. A muffled whimper, like someone trying to cough through a closed mouth. I turned my head toward the cargo area. There was a plywood divider behind the seats, painted black, with a small sliding window at the top. Closed. "What was that?" I asked. Dave's expression didn't change. "Probably one of the coolers shifting. This road's terrible. Coolers don't whimper." He laughed, actually laughed. "Whimper? You've got an imagination. It's the suspension. This old Ford makes all kinds of noises." I wanted to believe him. Honestly, I did, because the alternative was too insane. I was in a van in the middle of the forest with a stranger, no phone, no weapon, and a sound from the back that my brain was trying very hard not to categorize as human. Then I looked at the small mirror again, the one angled toward the cargo area, and I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The newspaper covering the passenger side window mirror, the one right next to my face, was peeling at the corner. Just a tiny flap, maybe an inch wide. The tape had dried out. Through the gap, I could see a sliver of glass. I don't know why I did it. Curiosity, I guess. Stupid, stupid curiosity. I reached up and peeled the newspaper back, just a little more. Enough to see my own reflection, except it wasn't my reflection. The face in the mirror was a woman. She was in the back of the van, sitting upright against the wall, her hands behind her. Her mouth was covered, duct tape, silver and thick, wrapped around her head. Her eyes were wide and wet and staring directly into the mirror, directly at me, and her lips were moving behind the tape, forming words I couldn't hear but understood perfectly. "Help me. Please." He's watching. I froze. My hand was still on the newspaper, my own face no longer visible in the glass, replaced entirely by hers. She couldn't have been more than 30. Dark hair, matted, a bruise on her cheek, wearing a green sweater I'd seen at Target last week, the small mirror on the dash, the one Dave said was for watching cargo. It wasn't for boxes. It was angled perfectly to see her, to see all of them, so he could watch without ever turning his head. Dave's voice cut through the silence. "You okay over there?" I couldn't speak. My throat had closed completely. My hand was still holding the newspaper flap, and I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, hard and fast. He looked over, saw what I was doing, saw the exposed mirror. His face changed, not angry, not scared, just flat, empty, like someone had turned off a switch behind his eyes. "Layla," he said, quiet, calm. "Put the paper back." I didn't. I couldn't move. "Layla, put it back and we can forget this happened." The woman in the mirror was shaking her head now, frantic, mouthing no, 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 no. I reached for the door handle. Dave slammed the brakes. The van lurched hard to the right, tires screeching on wet pavement. I wasn't wearing a seatbelt. I never do in other people's cars. And I know, that's stupid too. And my body pitched forward into the dashboard. My shoulder hit the glove compartment. Pain shot through my arm, white hot, but adrenaline is a hell of a drug. I didn't feel it. Not really. Not until later. Dave was reaching for me. His hand closed on my jacket hood. I twisted, kicked out, felt my boot connect with something, his face maybe, or his shoulder, and his grip slipped. The van was still moving, maybe 15 miles an hour, maybe less, but it was enough. I pulled the handle, threw my weight against the door, and launched myself into the dark. The ground came up fast, gravel and wet asphalt. I hit on my left side, rolled, felt my skin tear, felt my shoulder pop in a way shoulders aren't supposed to pop. The van's taillights were already shrinking into the fog, brake lights flaring red as he stopped. Then the white reverse lights came on. He was coming back. I scrambled up. My left arm wasn't working right. Dislocated, I found out later, plus a hairline fracture in my collarbone. But I didn't care. I ran, into the trees. The fog swallowed me in seconds, cold and wet and absolute. Behind me, I heard the van's engine idling, then the sound of a door opening. "Layla!" His voice was still calm, still soft. "You're going to get lost out there. Hypothermia is a real risk. Just come back. I'll take you to Eugene, I promise." I kept running. Branches whipped my face, roots grabbed at my ankles, my left arm hung useless, banging against my ribs with every step, sending waves of nausea through me. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I don't know how long I ran. 20 minutes. An hour. Time dissolves in the woods at night. Eventually, I saw headlights through the trees, not the van, something bigger, higher off the ground, a logging truck. I stumbled onto the shoulder of OR-22, waving my one good arm, screaming, probably looking like something out of a horror movie with blood on my face and my jacket half torn. The driver, an old guy named Earl with a Seahawks cap and a face like cracked leather, nearly swerved off the road when he saw me. He called 911 from his satellite phone, the only thing that worked out there, and wrapped me in a greasy Carhartt jacket while we waited. I couldn't stop shaking, not from the cold. I just kept seeing that woman's eyes in the mirror, kept hearing her silent words, kept feeling Dave's hand on my hood. The state police found the van 3 days later, abandoned on a Forest Service road near Detroit Lake. Inside, they found 3 people, 2 women and a man, all alive, all bound with plastic zip ties, all with duct tape over their mouths. Dave was gone. They never found him. The van was registered to a dead woman in Coos Bay, and the license plates were stolen from a Honda Civic in Albany. I gave my statement from a hospital bed. Dislocated shoulder, 3 cracked ribs, 17 stitches in my left palm and forearm, a mild concussion. The detective, a tired-looking woman named Reyes, told me Dave had been doing this for at least 2 years. He used the mirrors to monitor his victims, never turned around, never made eye contact, just watched them in the glass while he drove. Calm and patient, waiting until he found the right place to stop. They asked me to identify him from a photo lineup. I picked him out in under a second. But when I looked at his picture, some old DMV photo where he's smiling like a normal person, I felt nothing. No fear, no anger. Just this cold, hollow space where my trust used to be. Here's the part I don't tell most people, the part that keeps me up at night. 2 weeks after I got home, I bought a new car, a Subaru. First thing I did was adjust all the mirrors. And when I looked in the rear view, just for a second, I saw something. Not a face, not exactly, just a flicker. A movement in the back seat that wasn't there. I turned around. Empty. I checked the mirror again. Nothing. But I still don't use rear view mirrors anymore. I turn my whole body. I look over my shoulder. Every time. Because the thing is, Dave's still out there, and I don't know if what I saw in that mirror was real, or if my brain just broke a little that night and never quite snapped back into place. The police never found any evidence that Dave used the mirrors to project anything. They were just mirrors. Ordinary glass, reflecting what was actually there, which means the woman I saw, the one with the green Target sweater, was really there. And if she was real, then Dave was really watching her through that little round mirror the whole time he was asking me about my favorite coffee drink. I still don't know what happened to her. The police said all 3 victims were treated and released. Their names were never made public. I could probably find out if I tried. File a records request, dig through old news articles. But I don't want to know. I don't want to put a name to those eyes. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I pull up the missing persons database for Oregon. I scroll through the faces, and I wonder how many of them saw Dave's calm smile before they got into his van. How many of them noticed the taped-up mirrors? How many of them peeled back the newspaper? Just a little, just enough to see what was really there. I got out. They got out too, eventually. But Dave is still driving, somewhere, in a different van probably, with different plates, different mirrors, still watching, and I still check the backseat of my car every single time I get in. Even now, even 3 years later, I always will.